we've pretty much covered most of the dwarfs, and you can see kind of oozing out of that discussion balance issues, which I guess we'll move into now. I think just to give people an impression of what we're talking about for balance issues, let's go ahead and you guys had mentioned previously some of the typical builds and strategies you might see on the tabletop, and we'll use that kind of as an example to build off of.
You know how in old times they'd used to throw witches in the river to see if they float or sank to decide whether or not they were infested by Satan? A much easier test is to just have them build a dwarf army. If there's nothing but quarrelers, burn them. Simple as that, really. Because you can do that. You can build an entire army out of quarrelers, entire army of crossbowmen that will kick the living shit out of pretty much any standard infantry that by some fucking miracle actually manages to get within fighting range.
These guys are like
Not to
the
mention
corner
cannons.
campers of legend. It's ridiculous. You can, on the tabletop, literally, sit this army in a corner, and if you're so lucky that you got a hill in your deployment zone, you can stick your artillery on top of it. So if you happen to be one of those players, you can go die in a fire. We hate you. We really do.
It should be said that there exists a handful of people out there, no more than a dozen or so, that are actually willing to play dwarves in an interesting fashion. In which case, they will take some of the elite units to try and play the dwarves in the way that they're kind of supposed to be, with a very elite army with somewhat limited numbers and a very flexible playstyle. Now, I stress that there's about 12 of these people total in the 6 billion of us on this planet, but occasionally you might run across one of these rare creatures in the wild.
It's unlikely.
So
So very unlikely.
the temptation is with these guys, use as much range as possible because you're probably got the best range in the game in terms of cannons, quarrelers, and then even there's no incentive for you to move out from a defensive position, hole up, and then even if they get close, you kind of just sit there and tank it out. So that
Pretty
does
much.
pose a lot of issues. I mean, you take Sparta for instance in Rome, so you guys are familiar with that one. Whose okay main disadvantage is it's you can hit it from the flank and you can surround it. Now you give Sparta some guns, some cannons, and how on earth are you going to get around it? So there's an inherent problem with this army. Definitely, it has not only the ability to hold from the front, but also kill you at range. So even getting to them is going to be difficult. Now we did mention previously, outmaneuvering them might be a possibility in
Yeah.
Total War Warhammer, but I don't think that's going to be enough to nerf these guys. So perhaps I think what we mentioned before was the jacking up of prices on units, capping of certain types of units. So you can only bring one, two, maybe even three. Maybe if you guys want to touch on maybe some recommendations or insight you might have into how this could be done, perhaps lore infused rules as well.
I'm going to jump out ahead here because I've already done my army, so I've already done my video, so I've made up my opinion, so to say. In my opinion, the easiest way to try and control the dwarves is by limiting the numbers in their units. Say that a normal infantry unit is 120 strong. Okay, limit the dwarves to maybe 100 or even 80 to many of their more insane units like warless. So you could have an entire army of quarrelers, but you are going to be severely outnumbered if you do so. Perhaps outnumbered enough that when the ragged remains of your army actually reach the bearded little bastards, there just might be enough of you left to give them a fight.
Pretty much. I mean, like there has to be limitations on a lot of the units in the dwarf army because the dwarf army, in a nutshell, is an elite army of elite units. Like it's already ridiculous. So you've got to have a limitation on stuff like hammerers. Like perhaps hammerers can only be a bodyguard unit because that's generally what they are on the tabletop anyway. Or perhaps that iron breakers, you can only get one unit of them for every settlement you own, though that would be, I suppose, kind of difficult to code in. Well, maybe not. I don't know. That's not my area. Like, there's there's so much ability from their army being, and this is obviously assuming that they go from the lore as it stands. I'm really kind of hoping that they don't. I'm hoping that they take the units and then put their own sort of special spin on it because the way Games Workshop did it, is, as we've stated through the entire video, kind of ridiculous. Ridiculous. So my hope is that the you will be basically forced to make your army up out of dwarf warriors, maybe quarrelers if they kind of nerf the way they work in the lore compared to the way they work in a game. But it's so hard because they're so overpowered. That's like the message of this video. Fucking dwarves.
Yeah, and the we've already seen corner camping from all Total War. The easiest thing to do is
Actually,
camp a corner, so I'd be scared to see what this ushers in.
actually, on the corner camping thing, the dwarves can also do new boxes of hell. I have played against a dwarf player on the tabletop who literally assembled. Well, it wasn't really a noob box; it was more of a noob hexagon, so that there was no flank to actually attack one of his units from, and he moved it. Like he literally just moved it from one side of the table to the other, kind of daring me to try and break it. I couldn't.
From the perspective of a Skaven player, I also just because you might think like, okay, you can play Skaven, you have so many Skaven that certainly you can just flood around the flanks and overwhelm them.
Hmm.
Yeah, if he doesn't put his fat baited ass in a corner and
And
goes, well, I don't have any flanks.
dwarves get hatred against Skaven as well. So not only do you have to outnumber them and try to break them, but they hit you very, very hard because they're very angry at you. Like looking more and more just at Total War Warhammer as a game, looking more and more at it, I realize why the dwarves have to be in the game because they're very, very central to the theme of Warhammer in a nutshell. But I so wish that like Chaos, they perhaps wouldn't be available to be played because if you give a human player control of this kind of army, after a certain point, that just like, and it's going to be a very early point. It's not going to be like regular Total War games where it takes you maybe 50, 60 turns to just kind of ramp up and get going. You could probably in the first 10, 20 turns with dwarves just be like, oh, that's cool. I'm good. I'm just going to go conquer the world now. Bye, guys.
Yeah, so there's probably a whole bunch of built-in mechanics, ideally in the game, that would prevent you from doing that, make you play defensive. Probably resource limitations, debuffs from moving away from the mountains, things like that. We can hope.
Pretty much. I hope that that's the way it's going to be, that they get ridiculous nerfs to their natural. Like, it sounds bad. It sounds like somebody wants to just cramp their style entirely because we hate the dwarves. Arr. But no, it's because if you don't give them severe limitations, they're just going to steamroll the world. Even vampire counts are going to have trouble against the dwarves.
Especially vampire counts, because you got to remember one of your main strengths is scaring people, and the dwarves just go like, "I've seen scarier things in my mother's body, Assyriad."
Pretty much. Although the vampire counts are perhaps the only thing that dwarves will be scared of because they have ancestor worship. So the idea of bringing back dead dwarves is something that they kind of go, ooh, can we not go fight those guys?
They're going to be hard to implement for Creative Assembly, I suspect, and like this is just the campaign stuff. For multiplayer, oh, these buses are going to be a nightmare.
For multiplayer, I just expect that the first thing that people are going to say after they play dwarves a little bit is, no arty, no arty, 2 quarreler units max.
Yeah. Oh
It's,
God,
it's,
we're
it's
gonna be
going to
seeing
be
so
that
much
all over
spam.
again. Yep. Well, okay, so you mentioned spam. Again, to just go back to the tabletop for a second. We mentioned that it's entirely possible to make a moving noob box. We mentioned it's entirely possible to corner camp. What we haven't mentioned is that it's entirely possible to make up your entire army out of war machines. Just war machines. You can get away with having almost like 1 unit of infantry and the rest of it's war machines.
Yeah, and just blast everything
This
from
is
the
this is
front.
yes. This is why we don't like dwarves. This is why we can't have nice things as well. Please no. CA, if you're out there, if you're listening, please, for the love of God, don't do it. Don't fuck it up. It's gonna be terrible.
All right. Well, on that note, I think I'm gonna have to cut us off. I don't have the timer, but I'm sure everyone who's made it this far in the video wants a little bit of reprieve. If you don't, however, I'll link both of these guys in the description below, and you can have unfettered access to all kinds of lore videos. They go much
If you
further in
like
depth.
pain,
Yeah.
if you happen to be a masochist, come join us.
We have got you covered.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. So that's going to be it. Thank you so much to the both of you for coming in for this, and thanks for those of you watching or listening who stuck it through to the end. It's appreciated. So we'll see you guys next
We
time.
salute you.
Yeah,
We
kudos.
salute you because
You
it's a
have
struggle.
you might as well be a dwarf if you can tank it out till the end here. I think they deserve to be honorary dwarves.
Grow a beard,
Yeah.
have a massive tankard of beer, and just start speaking like a Scotsman, and you're set.
All right, guys. We'll leave it there. Thanks so much. See ya.
Bye.